What's up, my beautiful people? Hope you're having a wonderful day. Exile451 here with yet another daily dose of Reddit Happy. Welcome to the new year and the next decade. It's 2020, y'all, which means we got a fresh slate to do something better with our lives over the next 12 months and make this year the year that something really finally happens for us. So let's kick the decade off right with some stories out of r/random acts of kindness. Let's get to it. Our first story comes from user Cricket Songs. To the amazing stranger who cared for me when I became violently sick during a long bus ride, thank you. This happened about 4 years ago, but I think about it all the time. It was traumatic and could have been one of the worst experiences of my life. But this woman made such a huge difference for me. Sorry if some of this sounds gross, it involves some retching, but I promise I won't be graphic and it shouldn't be too gross. I used to have a really long commute from my home to the university where I studied and worked. This included one bus ride that took about 1 to 1.5 hours on the freeway, and once the bus hit the freeway, it didn't stop until it reached the university. I have a few pretty serious disorders, including severe anxiety, a traumatic brain injury that causes chronic pain and extreme nausea, stomach ulcers, and a hiatal hernia. The nausea frequently causes vomiting that is so prolonged and so violent that part of my stomach has been forced up into my throat. I had only recently developed most of these disorders and was still learning to cope with them, but the symptoms often hit me without warning, and they sometimes like to combine to form the perfect storm of abject misery. When I got on the bus that day, I was feeling mostly fine. And everything seemed okay for about the first 10 minutes once we hit the freeway. But then the nausea hit. As I realized that I might throw up and would be stuck with it for an hour, my anxiety skyrocketed, and I really began to panic. I frantically rummaged through my stuff, trying to see if I had a plastic bag or something to throw up into, but of course I didn't. For several long minutes, I sat staring out the window, just desperately thinking over and over, don't throw up, please don't throw up. But I knew it was a losing battle. So, of course, I threw up. And once I start throwing up, it's really hard to stop. I usually just keep vomiting until there's nothing but bile coming up. Sorry if that's overly gross. And the gagging is so violent and prolonged that I even have trouble breathing. I have actually passed out on a couple occasions due to my inability to breathe while throwing up. Though, thankfully, I did not pass out in this instance. Once it finally stopped, I glanced up to find that almost everybody on the bus was just glaring at me. A couple people were pretending not to notice, but kept stealing disgusted glances at me. I even heard a couple of girls near the front tisking and complaining about how I was probably just some drunk. I don't blame any of them for being disgusted, of course. But it was the sudden collective resentment, disdain, scrutiny, and judgment that really hurt. I was trapped, still sick and in pain, in a bus full of people who were openly judging me and glaring at me. It made my anxiety so much worse that I panicked and just started crying. I felt so humiliated and alone, and I couldn't even escape from the public scrutiny. I knew that I would be stuck with this, feeling trapped, embarrassed, and exposed for the next hour. Then, suddenly, a woman got up and sat next to me. She put her hand on my back and asked if I was okay. I couldn't really answer. She ran up to the front of the bus and came back with some napkins. I have no idea where she got them, and handed one to me so I could wipe my mouth. She even began helping to clean me up and gave me more napkins to wipe the vomit off the seat in front of me. I kept apologizing and saying thank you, but she just waved it off, telling me that it was okay and that she had 2 small children, so vomit didn't bother her that much. She rubbed my back, told me that everything was okay, not to feel bad, that it wasn't my fault, and then I started to calm down. She even cracked a couple jokes to make me smile and to distract me. And eventually, I was joking back. Humor is probably my biggest coping mechanism during traumatic experiences, and it's something that I use to calm other people down. So, I slipped into it pretty easily. We spent the next hour just chatting. I explained why I had probably gotten sick. My anxiety slowly lessened and I started tearing up again, but not because I was upset. It was because I was so touched by her concern and her sincerity. We had noticed some blood around my mouth, and when I explained that I had stomach ulcers and had vomited blood before, she urged me to go to the ER. She was a biochemist heading to work at the University Medical Center and insisted that I accompany her to the hospital just to get checked out and to make sure that my ulcers hadn't perforated. I eventually relented and agreed. So, we went to the medical center, and she even sat with me in the waiting room. I asked if she was going to be late for work, but she said that it was okay. She didn't want me to be alone. When they finally called me back to an exam room, we parted ways. I thanked her profusely, and before she left, she gave me a little side hug and said she'd hoped that I'd be okay. I never saw her again, but for 2 years I carried a little box of chocolates and a thank you card in my backpack just in case I ever ran into her on the bus again. I also carry a plastic bag with me everywhere I go in case I get sick in public again, which, unfortunately, has happened several more times, but never quite so dramatically, thanks to those bags. I will never be able to express how grateful I am to that amazing stranger who went above and beyond to help me that day. She really made such a huge difference. At a time in my life when everything was going wrong, when I was losing faith in humanity, in part because my brain injury had been caused by a vicious assault from a stranger, she proved to me that there are some truly amazing people out there. I just hope that she knows how much she really helped me that day. Edit, turns out my ulcers hadn't perforated or bled that day, by the way. The ER doctors performed a gastric lavage, inserting a tube through the nose and into the stomach, pumping saline into the stomach, and then sucking it back up to check for blood, and determined that my stomach wasn't bleeding. The blood had actually come from my esophagus/throat, which had been mildly torn by the force of my gagging and had bled. It's not a serious issue, and it's happened to me before, so it was fine. I was released from the ER with some anti-nausea meds and immediately caught the next bus home, but brought an emesis bag in case I got sick again. It's still a good thing that the woman convinced me to go to the ER though, because it could have been life-threatening if the ulcers had been bleeding. Wow. That is quite the dramatic story, OP. Frick. First off, I'm sorry that you have to deal with all that. It doesn't sound like that's anything easy to go through, especially when some of that stuff is brought on by the actions of another individual. But it does sound that you're at least managing to put together a life that you enjoy living, as best you can. But like you said in there, even if you're losing hope and faith in humanity, there are still those good people out there. There are still those good Samaritans who will go out of their way to help someone in need, even if they don't know them at all. Sadly, in this increasingly polarized and divided world we live in, it's becoming less and less common. But there are still good people out there who simply don't care about whatever category you might fall into and just see a person in need. Thank you so much for sharing. I'll be honest, I'd hoped that the story would have ended with you being able to see them again, but even if you don't, they still left a profound mark on your life. And I'm so grateful that they were there for you in that time of need. Keep doing what you're doing, keep at it, you're a stud, you're a champion, you can do this. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and wherever you're at, I really do wish you the best right now. This next story comes from user Shadow Child of Hades. But first, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you can get more of your daily dose of Reddit Happy. An old couple helps save my dad's business. My dad owns a woodworking business. This past summer, end of June/early July, when we were on vacation, a car driving 90 miles per hour went through the building, storage shed, and trailer we used to get products to craft shows. Luckily, no one was hurt because it was the middle of the night and we were out of the country. Scarily, due to a big order, my dad and grandmother could have been in there if we were actually home. There were pictures, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to link, but if so, I could make an Imgur album. And the building was in shreds. The guy made it through a shed filled with raw woods, a trailer with display items, and 40 feet of a cinder block building. Most tools, stains, materials, and all the odds and ends were destroyed. I can't even explain the carnage in words. We got the call at 1 a.m. and we didn't go to bed until 7 a.m. that morning, trying to call across the world and inform the large order guy that we may have a problem with his daughter's wedding order. Thankfully, we managed to deliver day of, and it all went smoothly. After we came back to the town and assessed the damage, we were trying to find a new building for the shop to live. Between the amount of tools and materials, we were panicked. everywhere was too far, too expensive, or too small for the amount of power tools owned. My dad put a plea on Facebook that if anyone had any leads to please let us know. We get a Facebook message one day from an old couple saying they may have a building in town if my dad wanted to visit. He goes and spends about half an hour talking, touring the building, and just getting to know these people. At the end of the tour, the couple goes, "We feel that you're a good guy. If this building works for you, we're willing to give it to you for only closing costs. Take your time, but we hope you accept it." That is the most kind anyone has ever been to my family. Giving an entire building for essentially a few $1,000s because our business and livelihood was destroyed due to one person's bad choices. We are still battling uphill, having taken loans for new machinery, supplies, materials, stains, paints, etc. But we never would have survived this nightmare without their generosity. Wow. It really is amazing how just one person being an absolute prick can end up completely shattering the livelihood of an entire family. And in this case, it's not even some rich villain CEO cutting back benefits or anything like that, like you hear so often. It's just some jerk who drove through a building. OP, I'm glad to hear that your family is doing better. That, yeah, you're struggling right now, but it sounds like this old couple kind of came in as guardian angels almost in your time of need, just there to fill an unexpected need that you guys suddenly had thrust upon you. Yeah, it might take you some time to dig out of this hole, and it sucks that you can't seem to be able to get insurance to cover anything here, but at least you guys have been able to pull things back together and somewhat recover. There are still good people out there in the world, and this couple just goes to show that there are those individuals out there who put the livelihoods of families ahead of their own personal gain. Thank you so much for sharing this story, and I really wish you guys the best and hope that you're able to rebuild this next year. That was r/random acts of kindness, and if you want more stories of people going out of their way to help complete strangers and rekindle your faith in humanity, then go ahead and check out that playlist link in the description below. Now you guys go out there, have a great day. I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Exile451. Stay beautiful, people.